Today we're going to do a little bit of a video about our chassis black versus our underbody protection and what the pros and cons are of both and how to prep the material and apply the actual paint itself. First of all, we're just going to prep up our lovely rusty piece of metal here. I'm just using a P120 piece of sandpaper. For bare metal prep, that's absolutely fine, up to about 320 I'd say, because you really do need to get a good coarse finish on it and a good rub down to try and get as much contaminants and rust off it as possible. So I'm just going to use our bare metal cleaner. It can help get rid of any contaminants, any grease, anything like that. You just want to give it a good wet up and a nice wipe down. This is our ferrous ink, which we're going to be putting on our workpiece, which is a water-based rust converter. When applying this to the actual product, it will go on white and it will turn to blue as it converts the iron oxide into a more stable zinc covering, which will obviously help with corrosion, but you don't need to use very much of it at all. I mean, I've put a tiny amount in the cap because you do use it very sparingly. When applying the ferrous ink, you want to go onto the affected areas with any red iron oxide looking at you. You can treat most bare areas that aren't bright steel black finish like this, and you will start to see it turn blue. As you stipple it into the area, you can use the brush, really press in, make sure it gets in all the gaps, all the areas, make sure that there's absolutely nothing uncovered. It starts to turn blue throughout the process. If you find you've got a heavily pitted workpiece, you can cut your brush fibres down to make sure that it's a more stippled brush so you can force them into the areas better. As you can see, it starts to turn blue as it starts to react with the iron oxide. So the ferrous ink is now dried. You can see it's got a nice blue hue to it. I'm just going to give it a quick prep clean again with a bit of bare metal 2802. You don't have to go too crazy with it, it's just to make sure that there's no contaminants come in contact with it while you've left it on its own. This is our underbody protection. As compared to the chassis black, this one is more of a heavy duty anti-corrosive coating. We would recommend this more in place of if you are driving through more rural areas, if you are doing a lot of off-roading, or if you live in an area where there's high salt content on the roads or seaside areas, anything like that. We would probably suggest this one because it is a much harder wearing product. But the only drawbacks are it doesn't come in a glossy finish, but the corrosion protection is vastly superior. So this is our chassis black. As compared to the underbody protection that we do, it's a slightly cheaper product, much more cost effective if you're wanting to do a restoration. It doesn't have quite the corrosion protection that the underbody does, but it is still very good. But the pros are, it does have a much glossier finish than the underbody, and it is a much nicer product for presentable areas if you can see the chassis, or if you actually want to show any chassis work or anything like that. I would recommend the chassis black because it comes out nice and glossy. We're just going to give our surface a little bit of a key. Of our Prep Clean 2800, which is our painted surface Prep Clean. Just going to give it a little, make sure there's no dust, no contaminants that have sat on it while you've been leaving it to dry. So first of all, we'll be painting our chassis black. It does have a higher coverage. As you can see, it goes on nice and thick. And it does have a lovely glossy finish, which should stay. The chassis black does have a longer drying time, 2 to 4 hours of touch dry. Now we're going to be painting on our underbody protection, which is an incredibly thick coating. I don't know whether you can see it on the video, but it does actually have tiny particles in it, which help with the corrosion protection. This will dry to a less glossy finish, almost satin, closer to matte. You can spray both of these products, but we would recommend using a Schutz gun for something like this. And the chassis black would still need thinning down slightly. You can treat them like primers with them being a little bit thicker and possibly shoot them through a primer tip, bigger nozzle like a 1.8. And they will come out, this one especially will come out with a textured finish, kind of similar to the bedliner products that are out there. And this one does dry to a lovely gloss finish. So if you're spraying it, it will come out quite nice.